We covered some basics about polynomials, and now let's discuss factoring. So factorization, or simply factoring, is a fancy word for breaking down a mathematical expression into simpler terms. So let's exemplify that initially with just a number, and let's consider number 9. So if you want to write 9 in terms of simpler terms or multiple terms, you can write it as multiplication. For example, 9 times 1 or 1 times 9. You can also say 3 times 3. So 9, 1, and 3 are all factors of 9. Then, if you want to introduce some fractions into factoring, you can also do that and, for example, say that 9 is equal to 1/10 times 90. But for the purpose of this video, we are going to keep it simple and not introduce as many fractions as we're going to introduce numbers and variables. So let's move on to an example with a variable. In this case, it's going to be a polynomial that's x squared plus 4x plus 4. And you might see it, you might notice that it's very similar to what we covered in a perfect square formula. In that video, we covered all of the formulas for the perfect square, and if you watched it, and if you did a few practice problems, you notice that this is the same as a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So we can factor it out to a plus b times a plus b, or simply write it out as a perfect square formula, a plus b squared. So that's one example of how you can use factoring to simplify polynomials. Now, not all of the polynomials are a perfect square. So in a minute, we are going to discover how to use a specific method to factor out different polynomials. But before that, let me show you how you can factor out, for example, just a variable. Let's say we have a polynomial that goes like this: 5x to the 4th plus 3x to the 3rd plus x squared. And in this case, we can't really factor out a number other than 1, which is kind of pointless. But you see that we have a repeating variable that's x. So in this case, we want to see what is the highest power of x in our polynomial. In this case, that power is 2. So this means we can factor out x squared out of this polynomial and write the rest inside a parentheses. Let me show you how it's done. So I'm going to say x squared. That means I'm factoring it out, basically pulling it out of this expression and putting it in front of the parentheses. And then what are we left with? When we divide 5x to the 4th by x squared, we are left with 5x squared. When we do the same thing with the following term, we end up with just 3x. And we divide x squared by x squared, we simply end up with 1. Okay, let's do a few examples where we can practice factoring out just a single variable. For example, 6x to the 5th minus 7x to the 4th plus 3x to the 3rd minus x. So just like we did in the first example with variables, we always want to check for the highest degree variable that we can factor out. So what is the highest power that repeats in all of them? It's the power of 1, right? So in this case, we can only factor out x. And we're gonna end up with 6x to the power of 4 minus 7x to the power of 3 plus 3x squared. And then negative x divided by x is simply negative 1. And you might be asking yourself, why do we need to take out the x of this expression? Why do we need to take out x squared out of this expression? It might not make sense now, but in the next video, we're going to start doing some operations with polynomials. We're going to add, subtract, divide different polynomials, and oftentimes factoring out a variable or a term, that means a number and a variable, will allow us to fully simplify a polynomial expression.